And doesn't this debunk your theory and defense of Israel, that it is difficult for them because Hamas embedded with the civilian population, where they can go after Hamas leaders in the heart of a civilian population in Beirut and in Damascus?
Is firing a missile at people delivering food and killing them not a violation of international humanitarian law?
Secretary Blinken, during his presser in Paris, did not condemn the airstrike, even though, as you confirmed, there was a dual American-Canadian citizen who was killed. The French foreign minister, who was at the same presser, did. You said you're outraged. Why is the U.S. not condemning the strike?
Does the White House accept Prime Minister Netanyahu's explanation that this incident was unintentional, as he put it?
Thanks. John, you said that the White House is outraged by the strike that killed these World Central Kitchen workers. Has the White House already conveyed that outrage to anyone in the Israeli government, and what was their response?
Well, I won't speak for the Israelis. We've been very clear about our feelings over this particular strike and our expectations of the Israelis.
Have they provided, or has the Pentagon been able to gain any understanding of what happened here yet? I know it's early, but it sounds, based on what Jose Andres has said, that these workers were doing everything right. Their vehicle was marked, they were in a safe zone.
Yeah.
What more could they have done?
Yeah, it's really, it's devastating to see these images and to hear these early reports about the steps that they tried to take to protect themselves. But the Israelis, look, they've already said this was on them, and they're doing this investigation. We obviously want to make sure that investigation gets completed and is as transparent as possible. And as I said in my opening statement, that there's accountability to be held here.
Thanks, Admiral. On the death of those World Central Kitchen aid workers, which includes one American who was killed, Netanyahu's reaction was, quote, "It happens in war." What is your reaction to that comment from Netanyahu?
I don't think it'd be useful for me to get into a tit-for-tat here with the Prime Minister of Israel from the podium. We've been very clear about our expectations for this investigation. We noted that the Prime Minister said himself there will be an investigation. So has his military said that. We look forward to that investigation being thorough and swiftly done. And as I said, that it'll be transparent, the results of it, and that if there's accountability that needs to be had, that it will be had.
But how can you take Netanyahu at his word? As Nancy was saying, this was a deconflicted zone. They had marched their car. They had even coordinated their movements with the IDF.
Yeah, and as I said in my opening statement, obviously, setting aside this incident, because this isn't the first one, there are issues of deconfliction that clearly need to be fleshed out and improved.
So how can the U.S. continue to send aid to Israel without any conditions? Yes, they have a right to...
We're not sending aid to Israel. We're sending aid into Gaza, and that's...
Weapons. How can the U.S. continue to send military aid
military
to
assistance.
Israel without any conditions? Is there no red line that can be crossed here?
We've had this discussion, you and me, quite a bit from up here. They're still under a viable threat of Hamas. We're still going to make sure that they can defend themselves, and that 7th of October doesn't happen again. That doesn't mean that it's a free pass, that we look the other way when something like this happens, or that we aren't and haven't since the beginning of the conflict urged the Israelis to be more precise, to be more careful, and quite frankly to increase the amount of humanitarian assistance that gets in. I haven't been asked about it yet, but I expected I would be. There was a discussion just yesterday with our Israeli counterparts about Rafah. Now, this one was done virtually. We expect it'll be an in-person meeting here in a week's time or so. But the whole reason to have that meeting was to talk about our concerns over a major ground operation in Rafah and to present viable alternatives for them to be more precise and more targeted. So the idea that we're some plastic graveyard here, and we're not paying attention to the civilian casualties or the civilian suffering is just not true.
Right, but these are verbal urgings, verbal commitments. There's no other incentive besides the urgings.
I know you want us to hang some sort of condition over their neck, and what I'm telling you is that we continue to work with the Israelis to make sure that they are as precise as they can be, and that more aid's getting in, and we're going to continue to take that approach.
Does the White House accept Prime Minister Netanyahu's explanation that this incident was unintentional, as he put it?
I think the investigation will bear that out.
Sir, do you think that given these circumstances, is there a role for some kind of a protective force for aid workers, given the threat of widespread famine and concerns about you've already discussed the J-lock coming in and so forth. Is there a role that could be considered to try to protect aid workers with a neutral party security force?
That protective force ought to be the IDF, Kelly, as we've said. I mean, as they conduct operations in a urban, highly populated environment, they have a concomitant obligation to take care of the civilians that are living there, and the civilians, quite frankly, that are being moved about by the combat operations that are being conducted in a very confined space. They have that obligation.
Are you concerned that aid will be cut off for some period of time now because Jose Andres has said they're suspending operations for a period? The World Food Program is having difficulties. It seems like this incident is exacerbating the crisis.
It certainly isn't helping. There's no question about that. And we obviously respect Chef Andres' decision not to continue operations, at least for a time. Certainly we respect that. And others may make that decision, as you talked about the World Food Program. We're not seeing a wholesale declination here of humanitarian assistance in there. But obviously, yes, that's a concern. The more violent it gets for humanitarian aid workers, and as I said, this is one of the worst in recent history, the less likely it is that they're going to be willing to take those risks, which means it's more likely that the people of Gaza are going to just suffer all the more. So yes, it's a concern.
Thank you, Greg. Secretary Blinken, during his presser in Paris, did not condemn the airstrike, even though, as you confirmed, there was a dual American-Canadian citizen who was killed. The French foreign minister, who was at the same presser, did. You said you're outraged. Why is the U.S. not condemning the strike?
I think by saying we're outraged, I think you can fairly characterize that as condemning the strike itself. Of course, I mean, nobody wants to see this kind of violence happen to humanitarian aid workers who, as was noted earlier, were doing all the right things.
Admiral, you said that there's going to be an investigation into the World Central Kitchen strike, and you're reserving the U.S.'s judgment until that's completed. But what's a reasonable time frame for that investigation to be concluded, and how regularly will the U.S. be getting updates on it?
I think in terms of time frame, as I said in my opening statement, we believe an investigation can be thoroughly conducted in a swift manner. Now, what is swift? I think obviously we're not going to dictate a date on the calendar to the Israelis, but it's noteworthy that just before coming out here, I was informed that they have completed a preliminary investigation and are reporting that up the chain of command. That's good. That means that they've gotten some basic findings and some initial conclusions that they're willing to make. They have noted publicly that they were responsible here. So that's another reason to suspect that it shouldn't need to be a long, drawn-out, weeks-long investigation. I think something like this could probably be resolved in a matter of days.
And you said that the questioner wanted you to hang some conditions over their necks, that of the Israelis. And your tone suggested you wouldn't do that. Why not?
I've already answered this question a whole bunch of times. We believe that the approach that we're taking is working in terms of making it clear to the Israelis what our expectations are. I'm not going to get ahead of decisions one way or another that we might take in the future. What I'm saying is right now we are continuing to support Israel because they continue to need military assistance, because they continue to face a viable threat.
But on the point of conditions, the President on February 8th issued a memo, and it said, and you already know this, but just for context, it said that it was the policy of his administration to prevent arms transfers that risk facilitating or otherwise contributing to violations of human rights or international humanitarian law. Is firing a missile at people delivering food and killing them not a violation of international humanitarian law?
Well, the Israelis have already admitted that this was a mistake that they made. They're doing an investigation. They'll get to the bottom of this. Let's not get ahead of that. Your question presumes, at this very early hour, that it was a deliberate strike, that they knew exactly what they were hitting, that they were hitting aid workers and did it on purpose, and there's no evidence of that. I would also remind you, sir, that we continue to look at incidents as they occur. The State Department has a process in place. And to date, as you and I are speaking, they have not found any incidents where the Israelis have violated international humanitarian law. And lest you think we don't take it seriously, I can assure you that we do. We look at this in real time.
They have never violated international humanitarian law ever in the past 5 to 6 months.
I'm telling you, the State Department has looked at incidents in the past and has yet to determine that any of those incidents violate international humanitarian law.
Go ahead, Nadia.
Thank you, Kirby. Mr. Kirby, Israel has killed a senior Hamas leader in Beirut with precision weapons in an area where thousands of civilians were there. They killed senior Iranian officials in Damascus, in the heart of Damascus. It was serious. There were thousands of civilians there as well. Does it make sense to you that a vehicle marked with word Central Kitchen, after coordinating with the Israelis, that they didn't see it? And doesn't this debunk your theory and defense of Israel that it is difficult for them because Hamas embedded with the civilian population, where they can go after Hamas leaders in the heart of a civilian population in Beirut and in Damascus?
To your second question, no, it's not my theory. I have talked about, well, now, just hang on just a second now. I've talked about this for months now. Fighting in an urban, highly populated, condensed environment like that's tough. But they have taken strikes against Hamas leaders successfully taken strikes against Hamas leaders in Gaza. I can't speak to what happened in Damascus. That I can only tell you that the United States wasn't involved. So I'm not going to talk about the details of that whatsoever. I'm telling you that they have taken precise strikes against Hamas in Gaza. They have also taken strikes that have been not precise. It looks as if very clearly what happened yesterday is one of those examples. They'll investigate that, and our expectation is, and we've made this clear to them, that they'll come clean about what they've learned. They'll be fully transparent, and if people need to be held accountable, that they'll be held accountable.